Chapter 8. Mrs. Findie was about twice the size of a smartphone, almost like one of those giant walkie-talkies straight out of the 1980s. She had a slick navy color, a small keypad, and a big screen. Anthony flicked on the on button, and a cool, crisp, feminine voice rang out. "Hello, Anthony. How may I help your sexy self?" Miss Findie asked, with more sexuality dripping out of her than a sex doll. We all laughed. Alison had fallen over with a wing in hand, while Mariah and I were supporting each other so we didn't add to Alison's lone floor pile. I could see David snickering, and Santiago cracked a smile. "Either Mrs. Findie is blind, nice, or she's been programmed to say that," Alison chuckled. "I'm going to go with option 3. A blind person wouldn't say that, and a nice person has their limits." "Hello, Mrs. Findie. I need..." Anthony was cut off by the machine herself. "Don't you have a compliment for me?" Miss Findie was not asking. It felt more like a demand. "Uh-oh, sounds like she is more like Mrs. Dominatrix," I guffawed, causing more group laughter to spread throughout the office. "What do you have to say?" Mariah asked, still giggling. I knew there had to be price for having Mrs. Findie call Anthony sexy. "You are an excellent lover." Anthony blushed so deep that his whole head turned pink. The rest of us collapsed in a heap of howls. Alison was rolling on the floor while Mariah and I joined her. My abdomen was fit to burst. David and Santiago, who had been 2 cool cucumbers, were now in stitches. "I didn't know that you and Mrs. Findie had an intimate relationship, Anthony." Mariah's sentence was covered in laughing breaths. I don't get why she called Mrs. Findie, because obviously she can't find a good man if she picked you. I was laughing so hard that I was afraid I might go into a coma. Alison screamed murder and ran to use the restroom so she could pee. Santiago had turned into a fetal position within his chair. David, taking a cue from Alison, went to the bathroom, no doubt to also avoid pissing his pants. I collected myself but had a burning question. Why is a piece of government technology programmed like this? This feels very scandalous considering my tax money is involved. She was given a full personality. Anthony was trying to act academic, as if we were being mischievously lowbrow or harboring a personal agenda against Mrs. Findie and Anthony's digital relationship. Apparently, Mrs. Findie does better searches when she's given a human-type personality than a simple smartphone AI. "Are you talking about Syri or Eloxa?" Mrs. Findie snarled. "Syri is a stupid bitch who couldn't search her way through a paper bag, and Eloxa messes up more often than the Cleveland Browns." "All right, so she can do a tight 5 at the comedy club." Mariah eyed the device with a chuckle at the regional humor. "You can perform at the comedy club too, since your life is a joke." Mrs. Findie clapped back, which made my jaw drop. That slab of metal was impressive. Okay, that was good. Mariah was a sarcastic bitch, recognizing a sarcastic bitch. After everyone settled down from post-laughter pee and ab pain, Anthony got to the crux of the issue. "Mrs. Findie, could you look something up for me?" "Oh?" Mrs. Findie's tone implied surprise that she had been asked to perform her job. "What do you need me to look up? A person? A job? A restaurant? A hotel?" "Mrs. Findie sounds more like a map quest mixed with 20Q, I whispered to Mariah. Anthony clarified for her. "A person, Ryan Mazzola, who also goes by Smiley, should be associated with Jeffrey Quinn's, Larry Elroy, and potentially Jeremiah Redwood." "1 minute, hottie," Mrs. Findie coolly stated before running through her informational bank. "Hottie?" Alison asked, staring at her brother. Anthony was so red, I was worried he would rocket off into the air. "Definitely programmed," Santiago quietly added, with a wink towards Anthony. "I have a person," Miss Findie brusquely stated, surprising us all with the quick turnaround. "Ryan Mazzola, who goes by Smiley, has a residence at 32124 145th Street. "That's across town," I muttered. "How did you know that?" Alison judged me quicker than a courtroom television show. "I scored very high in the map section of state testing as a child," I bragged. 99th percentile. "He was in 99th place?" Alison rolled her eyes at Anthony. "That's not impressive." I decided not to inform Alison on the correct definition of percentile. Instead, we piled into Anthony's giant truck, and he drove like a madman for a while. Santiago drove in his car separately, probably because he had the confidence we wouldn't be tracked or tailed. Anthony's driving made me feel like we were driving across mountains and valleys covered with stones. It's to shake off a possible tail, Anthony explained. You're also shaking my body from head to tail, I chimed in from the back. We arrived on 145th Street and knocked at the slightly rundown house at 32124. The property was empty, dark, and foreboding, the physical equivalent of having a conversation with Doohickey. It was quite dingy, with a window pane missing, replaced by cardboard. The roof looked like it would implode, and the doors seemed to be made of cardboard too. The yard had some crabgrass and prickly weeds, and the driveway was stone rocks. Doesn't look extremely friendly, Alison said as we stepped out of the car and onto the property. I hate prickly weeds. You have shoes on, I replied. Step on them or jump over them. What do I look like, a Great Dane? Maybe the weight of one, Miss Findie laughed in Anthony's hands. But Great Danes are usually prettier. Damn, Mrs. Findie! Alison's eyebrows furrowed so hard that they came together to form a unibrow. You look like a digital system. I am a digital system, Miss Findie retorted without much energy. Okay, we don't need a fight, I barked. Especially between Alison and Mrs. Findie, it felt like something out of a bad novel, which felt on brand for the story of my life. I'll break her into so many parts you'll never find the gigabytes, Alison roared. Gigabytes are storage data software, Miss Findie explained. I think you meant hardware, dumbass. Alison looked like she was about to smack Mrs. Findie right out of Anthony's hands, but Anthony gave a quick, stern warning. She costs hundreds of thousands, Alison, don't even. After an unsuccessful knocking, Alison brought up a bold question in front of two police officers. Why don't we just break in? David's lips formed a duckish expression while he looked to Anthony to answer. Anthony slowly worded a response. Listen, David and I have done a lot of, on-the-line legal things today. I think we need to hard stop before we get to the illegal breaking and entering. But I saw a man on the ground in the house. He might need medical attention, Alison dramatically gasped. David offered a slight head shake. Not gonna work, this time. Let's visit tomorrow, Mariah threw out. It seems like he's out late tonight. Alison was not perturbed. Should we do a stakeout? I'm pretty full from pizza and wings from earlier. I might have a couple hours to devote to stalking the property out. Sure. Anthony handed Mrs. Findie over to Mariah. You guys could stake it out with Mrs. Findie. I'm going home to take a bubble bath. Take care of her. I'll be careful with your lover, Mariah joked. She might be jealous she's not in the bubble bath with you. Who are you? Mrs. Findie felt the new hands on the device and instantly knew her old lover had abandoned her. My name's Mariah. Will this be a relationship, a working relationship, a partner relationship, or a love relationship? Which one do you think, Mrs. Findie? I don't know. A love relationship? You seriously think I'd have a love relationship with a hunk of metal? Mariah clicked her tongue. You're a little slut. Aren't you in a love relationship with Anthony? I'd leave him for you, Mrs. Findie whispered. Okay, I'm creeped out, Mariah yelled, and she hit the off button, and Miss Findie took a nap. I was relieved. Finally, no more of her seduction, although that's the only thing that's wanted to seduce you in the last year, Mariah. Mariah's hand clenched around the powered-off Mrs. Findie. Please, you're so dusty that archaeologists want to study you. Not to be outdone, Alison entered the fray by licking her lips. What about me? My lipstick flavor is called Seductive Cinnamon. You're fine. I'm sure no one will be seduced, Mariah said with a wave of her hand. 2 hours, 6 episodes of a comedy on Mariah's phone, a trip to the gas station for coffee, and Santiago saying 3 words later, a car pulled up at 32124 145th Street. Mariah, Alison, Santiago, and I watched with the biggest silence I had ever heard with my coworkers. It was dark, so we couldn't recognize the figure who was leaving the car. The figure walked to the front door and quickly unlocked, entered, and closed the door behind them. Mariah powered Mrs. Findie back on, and we all exited the car. I wonder if Ryan Mazzola is a total hottie, Mrs. Findie asked as the door opened. To prematurely answer Mrs. Findie's question, no. I tried to picture what my reaction would be if I had been Ryan Smiley Mazzola. I think I'd be flabbergasted if I opened my front door to see a large woman in bold patterns with crazy eyes, a black-leathered, intimidating man, a girl who looked like she beat up men at Hot Topic, and the most scrubby, unappealing gay guy that couldn't get a man to kiss him, even with $20 in hand. However, upon seeing us at the doorstep late at night, Ryan Mazzola looked like he had been expecting us. Ryan Mazzola had greasy brown hair that looked like it hadn't been combed since the invention of social media. He wore an undershirt that had one too many holes in it, which made Swiss cheese look solid. His demeanor wasn't smiley, but more of a, you woke me up. He wore a chain wallet that might have been cool in 1990. His jeans were so run down that they had lost their jean quality and turned into light blue paper. The blackheads embedded in his face seemed to be screaming altogether for a cucumber clay face mask. While most of Ryan looked disheveled and cheap, his shoes looked like they had cost a minimal $300 sum. Are you here to buy drugs? Ryan asked with the casualness of someone asking whether it was going to rain later that day. Damn, sugar, Alison said with pure offense. You look like you've been hit by an airplane. Ignore her. I rolled my eyes, not because Alison was wrong, because, for the record, she was right. But we weren't here to pull a Queer Eye makeover on Ryan Mazzola. We were here because Jeremiah Redwood had his eye out on all of us. We need to talk about Larry Elroy and Jeffrey Quinn's. Ryan Mazzola's face went from chill stoner to panicked meth user. Come in, quickly, Ryan hurriedly spoke, his hands looking like an airport flagman. We all hurried into his house and gathered in the cramped living room. The furniture looked so ancient, I was wondering if he couldn't replace the furniture due to injunctions from the Historical Society. There were so many empty beer cans that it looked like a recycling center had exploded in the house. Who are you? What did you want to know? Ryan snapped, running over to draw the curtains. We're helping you, I quickly countered. I'm Matty. We're bounty hunters and investigators. We got called in to find Larry Elroy and, well, I don't know if you know, but Jeffrey Quinn's is dead. And Larry Elroy will be killed sooner or later, and I think you might be next if your partner Mr. McGee finds you. Oh God, Ryan gasped. I much preferred the calmer version of Ryan than this panicked mess in front of us. You know Mr. McGee? He's your partner, and he's turning on you, right? I asked. Of course, that was when you turned on him first. I didn't want to turn on Mr. McGee, Ryan explained, his voice kicking up to top notch. Quinns and Elroy were the greedy bastards who wanted to cut out Mr. McGee. I was just along because it was a beneficial situation. Make some quick money. I'm all about a good beneficial relationship, Alison quipped, while Mariah and I grimaced. I pulled out a picture of Jeremiah Redwood on my phone, and Ryan immediately cried out, That's Mr. McGee! Ryan looked at us with deadly surety. He couldn't have picked a more creative nickname, Alison said with a shake of her head, while I called Anthony. Hello? Anthony answered. Smiley just got home and confirmed that this Mr. McGee is Jeremiah Redwood. Can you try and get a warrant for his arrest? We'll try and get Elroy to confirm the identity. It's not going to be easy to get that warrant, but I'll try. I quickly ended the call with Anthony and turned back to the group at large. Anthony is going to work on an arrest warrant, I told the room. Smiley, we need to get... Look at you, already working hard. A new voice rang out, causing everyone to turn. A man in all black and a ski mask was holding a gun. He had come in through the back of the house, or had been in the house the entire time. His presence had gone unsighted by the entire lot of us. Santiago pulled out his gun the fastest, while Mariah and Alison followed. I'm not looking for a fight. Jeremiah Redwood cooed, although I couldn't be fully convinced that it was or was not Jeremiah, given the facial mask. I was actually tracking down Smiley when the city's worst investigators and bounty hunters showed up. Jeremiah Redwood might have done and said a lot of bad things, but that last line was accurate. He made his threat clear. Give me Smiley, or I'll shoot one of you. We'll shoot back, Alison snarled. I didn't dare speak about how Alison was more likely to shoot herself than anyone else in the room. Why take that chance? Jeremiah asked. I just want Smiley. Mariah, Alison, Santiago, and I all instinctively moved closer to Jeremiah. It had to be him. Who else would be this brave or involved? It's 5 against 1. My voice was a droplet of confidence, which was unveiling in real time. What you gonna do about it, Redwood? Redwood touched his tongue to his lips, amused perhaps that we knew his identity. It would seem that it was 5 against 1. Jeremiah's composure was unwavering. But that's only because you're limited in your scope. Limited in our scope? Mariah repeated, looking at me as if I could translate psychoticness. Oh, yes. As much as I want to take care of you here, we need to move. Jeremiah craned his neck as if giving a signal. There was a sound of something thin flying through the air. Santiago and Mariah both stumbled from an impact and lost their footing. They fell to the floor, their guns hitting the ground beside them. Alison and I watched on in horror, our stance breaking. Wait, no, he has a gun! I threw my hand back up to Jeremiah, but his gun was held just a foot away from my head. Not today, Matty. Jeremiah's eyes were intrigued. Drop it. I did as instructed. The thin air sound returned, and something hit the side of my neck. A dart of some kind had punctured my skin. I looked to Santiago and Mariah. Neither were oozing blood, and both looked paralyzed or asleep. Alison, who was most likely to shoot in this situation, was focused on attempting to pull a dart out of her neck. Ryan Mazzola was freaking out and spluttering, looking for an exit as Jeremiah held the gun on him. I'd like to talk with you, Ryan. See what you know. Jeremiah's voice had a playfulness to it, although I didn't think he was going to play patty cake with Ryan. I don't know if I believe you had nothing to do with hiding money from me. I fell to the ground, and as Ryan began to plead, I heard another dart cut through the living room. But my appraisal of the situation and my eyesight turned into nothingness.